Hi, this is Zach with Warner Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the new Tissot luxury automatic featuring the Powermatic 80 movement. Tissot is a brand that hardly needs any introduction. They're part of the Swatch group. They're available at retail. They have large ad campaigns. You know, it's definitely a household name, but they're one of the few kind of mass-produced Swiss watch brands that have, you know, kind of an affordable and accessible range of mechanical watches specifically, so you can find mechanicals and interesting ones at under $1,000. This newest offering is particularly interesting because it has what I believe is really kind of a first for a watch in this price category, which is an 80-hour power reserve. But on top of that, it happens to be an aesthetically very interesting watch with a very unique case design and an interesting kind of layered dial design. And it goes for $895, which for an 80-hour power reserve for a Swiss-made watch, I think is quite a good deal. So let's take a closer look now. So perhaps the most interesting thing about this watch is actually the movement inside of it. They're introducing a new movement called the Powermatic 80, also known as the ETA C07.111, and it features an 80-hour power reserve. Now, if you know anything about watches kind of in this price range, really let's say under $5,000, your average power reserve will be around 40 hours. That's typical on your ETA 2824-2s, it's on your Miyota 9015s. You know, it all teeters around 40 hours. So typically when a watch has a larger power reserve, such as an IWC 7-day power reserve or the Vacheron Constantin 14-day power reserve, they have more mainsprings in them, or more barrels as it's called. This watch actually has just one barrel, and it's actually a modified ETA 2824-2. And in order to make it increase the power reserve, they actually just made the watch more efficient. One of the ways that they did this was they lowered the vibrations per hour from 28,800 to 21,600, and there's a noticeable result from that. And you'll see that the second hand is actually ticking 6 times per second rather than 8 times per second, having a little bit more of a jumpy sweep. It does not affect the precision or accuracy of the watch at all, but it is a visual effect of this modification. In the end, you have a very pragmatic effect of a longer lasting movement. And I do think this is a very interesting thing for them to do because it is so pragmatic and it isn't flashy. You know, a chronograph has a button on it and, you know, extra hands. GMT also has extra hands, things like that, things that are really kind of you can point to and say this watch does that, rather than just functionally lasting longer. And I have to say I really appreciate that they did something that is so practical. So now let's take a closer look at the movement itself. It looks a lot like an ETA 2824-2 architecturally. It has kind of the same layout. There is a little bit of decoration, though not a ton, in the form of kind of a waveform pattern that is going on here. Once again, obviously it is an automatic movement, and it has 23 jewels rather than the ETA 2024, which has 25 jewels. But also like the ETA 2024, it is hand windable, so you can wind it, and it has hacking seconds. The case of the luxury automatic has a very interesting and elegant design to it with some kind of surprising details. It measures 41 millimeters in diameter, making it actually fairly wide for a dress watch, but I think that's tempered by the fact that it is 9.75 millimeters tall, giving it kind of a slim fit so that it'll fit under a shirt sleeve nicely. It has a 22 millimeter lug width and a 48.75 millimeter lug to lug. Like I said, there's really a lot of interesting things going on with the dial or the case, and the case actually made of several parts and really interesting finishing throughout. So looking at it just directly now, you have a polished bezel here, and then these kind of angular lugs that I like. They add a bit of edge, a little bit of masculinity to the watch immediately. They have a brush finish that goes, you know, kind of vertical along the direction of the dial, and then along the very edge of the lugs is a slight chamfer with a polished finish on it. But then looking at the watch from the side, you can see how interesting it gets. So, you know, the lugs continue this angular design. And then the case side, and I've never seen this before, actually has a textured pattern to it. And I believe it's kind of like a pressed pattern of almost looks like a woven steel. You know, it's nice to see a level of attention and detail brought to the case side, which is often a very kind of overlooked part of the watch. You know, it just kind of it usually is a simple polish or a simple brush, but here it's totally a unique element to the watch. You can also see here that there is a signed crown with a little Tissot T that is polished and that sits within a matte area. It is a fairly small crown, but for grasping it, for winding the watch is hand windable. It is very easy to turn, though it's a little hard to get to pull out, but really it's not much of an issue. Overall, I think the detailing here, though, is very, very nice. And you can also see, it's just an interesting, intricate case. So you have a bezel. The lugs appear to actually be a separate element. Not 100% sure how they attach. Then this case side is separate, and then the case back is yet another piece. So it's a little more complex, which is nice to see. Turning the watch around, you can actually see that it has a display case back through which you can see the Powermatic movement, also known as the ETA C07.111. The dial of the luxury automatic has an interesting layered build. Rather than being a printed dial, it functions by way of reflection and three-dimensionality, which I think plays really nicely off of the textured and kind of uniquely finished case. So now looking in, you can see it has kind of a matte silver background with various applied elements. There's this large inner brushed ring that it creates one level of immediate contrast from the matte. It's a little darker, and then along the edge of that is a chamfer, which then reflects light once again differently from the inner ring. So you just have a lot of play in those three elements alone. And then kind of intersecting that are the hour markers, and those are little steel batons. They're polished, and they are all chamfered on the very outer edge too. So you have almost like a sense of light to dark in the finishing, the matte being lightest, brush being middle, and the reflection almost having a dark look because it's picking up colors from the room around you. So it has a lot of contrast. And then around the very outer edge, there is a printed index, so just small black markers for the minutes, which does give the watch even more legibility. At 3 o'clock, you have a date window, and that is a black date on a white disc. At first, I honestly thought it was silver because it integrates so closely into the dial itself, but it is black on white. It is legible. It's nice to have the date there. In the center of the dial, you do have a little bit of writing. You have Tissot 1853 below 12 and Powermatic 80 above 6. There's a lot of space in that area, but I do think that it's well laid out. It's not too much space. I think it's comfortable. The hands of the watch are also a polished steel, and they're very simple, tapered sticks, and they contrast again against the matte dial. Overall, I think it's a very elegant and kind of subtle design, one that is very enjoyable to look at because, like I said, it's all based on reflection. So as you move the watch, as you change rooms, it kind of takes on a slightly different appearance. It also has a little bit of like a kind of controlled glimmer, which I think is very nice for an elegant dress watch. On the wrist, the luxury automatic has a lot of presence, but it's not ostentatious. The all-steel aesthetic, I think, really works for a dress watch that you want to have a little bit of subtlety to, because it has a level of kind of glint and glimmer that I think is elegant, attracts a little attention. It's a little bit more of a jeweled style, but it's still very masculine and has this kind of heft of looking like it is all metal. The size, 41 millimeters, I think is a very comfortable size. It is a bit large for a dress watch, but like I said, it is a fairly thin and flat watch, so it's really not an issue, to get under a shirt sleeve, anything like that. I would like to see perhaps like a 38 millimeter version as well, but this is a happy medium for large and smaller wrists. I have a 7-inch wrist, and I think this still fits fine. The watch comes mounted on a really, really nice steel bracelet here. It's a 22 millimeter lug, and the bracelet actually tapers from 22 to 20 at the clasp. You can see here that this is not, a diver clasp. It's a butterfly clasp, so there's 2 buttons on the side. You push them, and it pops right open. This creates a very seamless look, which I think is a little bit more elegant than a more rugged type of clasp. The finishing on the bracelet is also very nice and works well to integrate it into the case and the dial. So you can see it has a brushed finish going up, but there's a line of polish running along the center, which I think is just, adds a little bit more visual interest and just ties the whole thing together quite nicely. The Luxury Automatic by Tissot is a really interesting watch and kind of a very exciting watch to see one of the large retail Swiss brands to make. The 80-hour power reserve alone, I think, makes it just genuinely unique and, gives it a feature that you can really kind of utilize in the sense that you can take the watch off, obviously leave it off for just over 3 days, and it'll be, keep, solid time. The price on this watch, I think, is also really exciting for a watch, once again, with the 80-hour power reserve at $895. It is a unique price, and they're actually going to have this movement in watches at around the $600 price point as well. But, this Luxury Automatic also lives up to, I think, its name. Luxury is a bit of a strong word to use, but it is a very elegant dress watch with a really, really nice design and an interesting design too. The textured case sides, the finishing, the layering of the dial. It's a really high quality, well finished piece that, once again, for a sub $1,000 dress watch, I think really comes together to be a great watch with the addition of an 80-hour power reserve. There's nothing really else to say. I really think this is a wonderful offering from Tissot. So please read the full review on WarnerWound.com. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you.